Imagine spending like $150 million to build this massive, sprawling vessel, only to realize half your crew wants to navigate by the ancient stars they've studied for decades.
Right, and the other half just wants to punch an address into a GPS.
Exactly. That is the exact, honestly nearly impossible reality of adapting One Piece for live-action television. Today, we are analyzing the second season of this colossal production and really looking at its incredibly complex relationship with its audience.
Which is a very fragile relationship, let's be honest.
It is. So we're asking a fundamental question here. Does this show successfully bridge the gap between longtime diehard fans and brand new viewers through, clever adaptation and fan service? Or does it actually alienate both groups by sacrificing the core narrative philosophy just to cover up superficial budget-driven changes?
It's a fascinating dilemma, really, because it forces us to look right at the intersection of creative storytelling, financial reality, and, well, the heavy burden of legacy source material. I mean, when you have die-hard fans who have breathed this story for a quarter of a century, and then new viewers who just clicked play on a Friday night, serving both is a precarious tightrope walk.
Definitely. And my position is that I look at this season and see a production that brilliantly balances those two extremes. It offers what I call archaeological level fan service for the veterans, while actively streamlining the dense lore so new audiences aren't just, completely lost at sea.
I hear that, I do, but I look at the exact same creative choices and I see a cynical compromise. To me, these changes hollow out the emotional depth of the original story. They patronize those diehard fans with cheap Easter eggs while actively misleading new viewers, largely to mask the harsh reality of their budgetary limitations.
Well, let's start with how the show treats its veterans then, because I think the dedication to the lore is frankly unprecedented. Take Logtown, for instance.
Ah, the town of the beginning and the end.
Right. There's a 2.5-second cameo of a little girl in a blue dress slapping the sniper Usopp's hand when he goes to buy goggles. Now, a new viewer thinks absolutely nothing of it. It's just a funny background interaction, right?
Sure.
But a die-hard fan instantly recognizes her as Carol, the daughter of a bounty hunter named Daddy Masterson. That is a character pulled from a 25-year-old anime filler episode. The meticulous effort to cast, costume, and include that specific character for 2 seconds. I mean, that is a profound validation of the veteran fans' decades of investment.
Okay, I'll give you that the Logtown Easter eggs are cute, but a 2-second cameo of a little girl doesn't make up for structural gutting.
Gutting? That's a strong word.
It is gutting. The extreme fan service, like the Carol cameo, it acts as a smokescreen. It distracts from profound philosophical alterations they make to the main plot. Look at the primary antagonist of the season, Crocodile.
Right. The leader of the secret criminal syndicate Baroque Works.
Exactly. In the original text, his complex political quest is entirely focused on uncovering an ancient weapon known as Pluton, which is a battleship capable of vaporizing entire islands. Crocodile isn't just another pirate looking for gold. He is a subversive actor attempting to upend the global military balance.
Which is great in a long-running manga, but...
Wait, let me finish. What does the live action do? It simplifies his motivation into a straightforward desire to find the One Piece, the legendary pirate treasure. By removing Pluton, you remove the entire geopolitical foundation of the series.
But see, I look at that change and think it actually saves the narrative from collapsing under its own weight. I mean, you have to consider how television escalation works.
Escalation.
Yes, if you introduce a world-ending weapon of mass destruction in your second season of a TV show, where do you go in season 5? Where do you go in season 8? By holding back the concept of Pluton, the showrunners are preserving the structural integrity of the long-term narrative.
I strongly disagree.
They are pacing the world building. New viewers can digest the immediate stakes, Crocodile's criminal syndicate trying to overthrow a desert kingdom before we expand into, global Armageddon.
I understand the fear of narrative bloat. I really do. But the cost of that simplification is massive. That Pluton plotline elevates the story from a simple treasure hunt into a complex commentary on deterrence, power, and statecraft. By changing his goal to just wanting the One Piece, the show turns a uniquely calculating, politically motivated villain into a generic, interchangeable bad guy.
That's a bit harsh.
It's true, every kid on the playground wants to be the superhero, right? Now, every villain in the show just wants the one piece. It patronizes the new viewer by assuming they can't handle complex political machinations, and it infuriates the diehard fan who knows how crucial the Pluton plotline is for the entire second half of the saga.
Okay, wait. Let's pause on character motivations for a second, because I think the translation of these characters to the screen reveals a lot about the show's priorities. You mentioned earlier that the show makes philosophical compromises. How so?
Well, this brings us to the most glaring thematic casualty of the season. Tony Chopper, the reindeer doctor.
Are you saying they fundamentally failed his backstory, or are you just taking issue with his visual design in live action?
Both, actually. Because in live action, visual design is backstory.
Okay, explain that.
In the original narrative, Chopper eats a magical fruit that turns him into a human reindeer hybrid. But the result is a terrifying, oversized, grotesque monster. The villagers shoot at him because he looks like a yeti. When the eccentric doctor, Hiruluk, finds him freezing in the snow, he demonstrates radical acceptance. He sees past the horrifying exterior to the suffering soul beneath. It is a profound meditation on overcoming societal prejudice.
And in the show, they opted for a much cuter design.
Cuter is an understatement. It's a plushie. Hiruluk finds a cute, shivering chibi creature, a small, exaggeratedly adorable mascot. This change completely destroys the original message of unconditional acceptance. I mean, if you find a cute, wide-eyed plushie in the snow, anyone would rescue it.
Well,
It requires zero moral fortitude. The villagers who reject him no longer look like a society struggling with prejudice. They just look completely insane for shooting at a cute puppy. The core theme is replaced with a hollow scene designed to appeal to general audiences and, frankly, to sell merchandise.
I think that's a very uncharitable reading of the constraints the production is under. You have to look at the mechanics of television production. Rendering a giant, terrifying, hyper-realistic reindeer monster using prosthetics and CGI for every single episode, that would bankrupt the show.
So they compromise the theme for the budget? That's exactly my point.
No, they distill the theme. The essence of Chopper's backstory isn't just that he is ugly, it's that he's an outcast. He isn't fully reindeer and he isn't fully human. Even with a cuter design, the live action still conveys his profound isolation.
I just don't think it lands the same way.
But if we're talking about character translation and the realities of the budget, let's look at how the show adapts action, because that's where the biggest constraints lie, and in my opinion, where the show makes its most brilliant pivots. Look at the captain, Luffy, and his encounter with the giant whale, Laboon.
Oh, you mean the pivot that completely neuters the protagonist?
I disagree completely. Let's explain this for the listener. In the original story, Luffy engages in this massive physical fight with a mountain-sized whale to give the grieving creature a new sense of purpose. But in the live action, instead of fighting, Luffy dances the Nika dance, which is a physical manifestation of the sun god of liberation in the lore. And he sings Binksake, a beloved pirate shanty that carries decades of emotional weight.
Right.
Now, I argue this is a masterful stroke. For the diehard fan, singing Binksake is a massive historical tribute that heavily foreshadows the thematic endgame of the series. And for the new viewer, it smoothly introduces Luffy's core personality. He is a pacifist at heart, a captain who prefers to throw a party rather than throw a punch.
But that isn't character development. It is a budgetary band-aid.
A band-aid.
Yes. Think about the compounding costs of what you just described from the manga. You have to render realistic water mechanics, colliding with a massive CGI whale while animating a live-action actor stretching like rubber. That is financially exorbitant, so they pivot to a musical number, and because of this economic reality, Luffy's characterization as a capable fighter is fundamentally nerfed throughout the season.
How is he nerfed? He still fights his core battles.
Barely. Look at his fight with Mr. 3, a villain who manipulates wax. Instead of using his genius-level battle instinct to pinpoint his enemy like he does originally, the live action reduces Luffy to flailing blindly into the air hoping to hit something.
It was a chaotic fight.
And against the pirate Alvida? He gets knocked away by a completely invisible CGI spiked club, flying out of frame with bizarre, weightless physics. For a diehard fan, this completely betrays the protagonist's established competence. And for a new viewer, it presents a fundamentally incompetent captain who constantly needs rescuing by his crew.
See, I look at adapting manga to live action as akin to translating poetry. You cannot carry over every little word, or in this case, every highly stylized, costly CGI stretch. If you try to do a one-to-one translation of an illustrated fight scene into live action, it almost always looks weightless and absurd. By limiting Luffy's powers, the show translates the feeling of danger for a new audience. Let's look at the Whiskey Peak arc.
Ah, the bounty hunter town.
Right. In the live action, Sanji, the crew's martial arts chef, is tied to a chair. He sits out the major fight, while a sea otter named Mr. 13 proves to be a surprisingly challenging opponent.
Which, again, renders one of the primary fighters of the crew entirely immobile and helpless.
But consider why they do it, by sidelining Sanji and establishing that even the local wildlife in the Grand Line is lethal. The show forces a reliance on teamwork. Most importantly, it gives the swordsman Zoro the absolute spotlight to shine.
I'll admit, the Zoro fight was well done.
It was incredible. During that fight, we see Zoro hallucinating Dracula Mihawk, the warlord who nearly killed him in Season 1. Zoro is counting the bodies he cuts down just to stay mentally focused. That psychological layer, showing how the defeat by Mihawk deeply traumatized him, is something even the original author didn't explicitly spell out so early in the story. It elevates the material for both audiences. The veteran fan gets a deeper look into Zoro's psyche, and the new viewer actually understands the heavy stakes of his ambition.
Okay, I will concede that the psychological framing for Zoro is a smart addition. But if they're willing to alter the mechanics of a fight to save money, it begs the question of what else they're altering. And to me, the most egregious changes aren't the physical ones, but the narrative ones. Specifically, how they edit the foundational lore to manipulate the audience.
You're talking about the execution scene?
Yes, the flashback to the execution of Goldie Roger, the former Pirate King. In the live-action prison scene, Roger speaks to the Marine Vice Admiral Garp and says, "Take care of my son." The director then immediately cuts directly to Luffy's smiling face.
A brilliant piece of visual suggestion.
It is intentionally manipulative editing. It feeds new viewers a completely false soap opera narrative that Luffy is Goldie Roger's son. Within the original material, the world building is organic. The overarching theme of the series is inherited will. The idea that dreams and ideals are passed down through generations, not through literal bloodlines.
Sure, but
This cut completely artificializes the drama. It forces a "who is my father" trope onto a story that was never fundamentally about that kind of familial melodrama. They are substituting the profound thematic message of inherited will for cheap drama, purely to artificially hook a new demographic who might otherwise tune out.
you call it manipulation, but you have to remember the modern streaming landscape. A weekly manga reader back in 1999 had the patience to let world building unfold organically over years and hundreds of chapters. A modern streaming audience needs an immediate narrative hook to commit to a dense, sprawling fantasy world.
But you shouldn't hook them with a lie.
It's a misdirection, and there's a difference. By planting this seed, the directors create immediate dramatic tension for the uninitiated audience. It makes the dense, intimidating lore feel like an intimate family mystery. And for the longtime fans, they already know the truth of Luffy's parentage. They get to sit back and appreciate the clever, playful misdirection the showrunners are employing. It's a wink to the audience who knows better, and a tether for the audience who doesn't.
But a tether based on a lie eventually snaps. If you hook a new audience by promising them a familial drama, and the story is actually a sprawling geopolitical epic about freedom and government corruption, you are going to alienate them when the truth is finally revealed. And honestly, this speaks to a broader issue with the adaptation: the sterilization of the world.
Sterilization?
Yes, it isn't just the narrative that's being smoothed over for the sake of casual viewers. It's the entire visual and aesthetic experience.
You're referring to the costume and casting choices, I assume.
Exactly. The world of pirates is supposed to be gritty, sun-baked, and weathered.
Yet the live-action aesthetic feels like a pristine fashion show. Zoro's muscles are perfectly oiled in every scene. The navigator Nami wears a wardrobe that is highly revealing and entirely impractical for actual sea travel.
It's a fantasy show.
But their clothes look like they just came off a factory line. They're completely devoid of the dirt, salt, and wear and tear of maritime life. And look at the casting of Crocus, the lighthouse keeper. In the flashbacks to 50 years ago, when Crocus should mathematically be a 21-year-old young man sailing with the Rumbar pirates, the production uses the exact same elderly actor.
Which is a fascinating, highly theatrical choice.
It's an illogical choice. It breaks the immersion completely. If a diehard fan is watching specifically to see the prime years of this legendary pirate crew, presenting an octogenarian as a young sailor shatters the reality of the timeline. It feels like they just didn't want to pay for a younger actor.
I understand why that breaks immersion for someone tracking the exact timeline on a wiki page, but you have to step back and look at the tone the show is setting. This isn't a documentary about 17th century maritime history. It is a heightened theatrical reality. The choice to cast the elderly Crocus in the flashback isn't an error in basic math. It's a thematic, almost philosophical statement about the Grand Line itself.
A statement?
Yes, the sea ages you. It is a harsh, relentless environment that conceptually strips away youth. And using the older actor is a bold visual metaphor for that timelessness. Furthermore, the pristine nature of the costumes is a deliberate translation of the vibrant, colorful aesthetic of the source manga. If they made it too gritty, it would look like every generic pirate show from the last 20 years, completely losing its distinct identity.
There is a very distinct line between colorful and artificial, and I think they cross it constantly.
But the show leans into that artificiality to create a unique cinematic vocabulary, one that actually speaks to both the diehard fans and the new viewers. Look at the meta references they employ. They title an episode The Girl with the Swordfish Tattoo. When Zoro sees the giant whale Laboon for the first time, he literally quotes the animated film Monster House, deadpanning, "That is a whale."
Which felt incredibly out of place.
No, these aren't accidents. They are deliberate, modern cinematic bridges. They welcome new viewers by tying this bizarre Rubberman pirate world to familiar pop culture touchstones, while showing longtime fans that the creators are playful and self-aware. It prevents the show from taking itself too seriously and getting bogged down in gritty realism.
But when you rely heavily on pop culture meta-references and sterilized aesthetics, you dilute the actual stakes of the world. And honestly, that brings us full circle back to the budget. We see it with Chopper's character design shifting from a terrifying monster to a cute mascot to avoid complex prosthetics. We see it with Luffy's combat being sidelined for a song and dance to avoid rendering water and stretching rubber. We see it with Sanji tied to a chair.
You're reducing creative choices to mere accounting.
Because they are. The show's reliance on superficial fan service, like the 2-second Carolyn cameo in Logtown, cannot hide the fact that the actual skeleton of the story is being compromised. And as production costs for these massive CGI elements inevitably rise in future seasons, this strategy of hollowing out the core to save money while tossing Easter eggs to the fans is completely unsustainable.
Well, we have definitely arrived at the crux of the matter here. To pull my thoughts together, while this adaptation undeniably takes liberties with the source material, I believe it successfully manages an incredibly delicate balancing act. It offers rich, nuanced archaeological Easter eggs for the diehard fans, proving a deep, foundational respect for the world.
A superficial respect, maybe?
No, a foundational one. And at the same time, it crafts a streamlined, visually striking, and emotionally resonant entry point for new audiences who might otherwise be alienated by the sheer density of a 25-year-old mythology. By focusing on the spirit of the characters, like Zoro's trauma or Luffy's pacifist nature, rather than demanding a literal one-to-one translation of every manga panel, it proves itself as a necessary, brilliant evolution for a new medium.
And from my perspective, the tension between commercial viability and artistic integrity leans far too heavily toward the commercial here. The show's aesthetic sterilization, its manipulative editing tricks regarding Luffy's parentage, and its philosophical compromises, particularly in diluting the thematic weight of prejudice with Chopper and political deterrence with Crocodile, they betray the soul of the material. A 2-second cameo for the veterans does not make up for stripping a narrative of its profound commentary.
We just read the commentary differently.
But by trying to serve both the die-hard purists and the casual new viewers, it ultimately risks satisfying neither camp, simply papering over harsh budgetary realities with an artificial charm.
It seems we remain deeply divided on whether these alterations represent a brilliant, necessary translation to live-action television or a cynical compromise of the narrative's soul. The tension between preserving the historical weight of that massive vessel and updating its navigation for a modern crew is a debate that certainly warrants much deeper exploration of this incredible world.
Absolutely. The choices made here are going to ripple through any future adaptations of this scale. And the sustainability of this dual audience model remains an open, vital question.
So we leave you with that original thought. When you step onto a massively expensive, renovated ship, do you marvel at the brilliant new engines propelling it forward for the masses? Or do you mourn the original weathered sails that were stripped away to make room for them?
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe and hit the bell to the later update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end and see you in the next video.